Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Russ Powell.
Thank you. What an honor to be here. Wow. So my name's Russ Powell. I am a learning industry veteran and training consultant with the firm Peregrine Performance Group. I'd like to take you back to a time many years ago, 1991. Brian Mulroney is the Prime Minister of Canada. Jazz fans are in mourning over the death of the legendary trumpet player Miles Davis. For the first time in many years, the United States has 2 teams in the Stanley Cup Finals. Pittsburgh beats Minnesota. Better? Better? All right, we'll keep. And this is how I began my workday. Thank you. I was in my 20s, fresh out of graduate school, and my first consulting business had crashed and burned. I was, to get back on my feet financially, I was waiting tables in a new shopping and entertainment district in Atlanta. And to attract more tourists, this district had put out a call for buskers, street performers, and this piqued my interest. You see, just a few years earlier, I had finished my undergraduate studies in New Orleans, and while there, I learned to juggle from some extraordinary performers who worked the French Quarter. I had learned a few good tricks and had even performed at a few campus events, so I figured when this opportunity came up in Atlanta, what the heck, I should audition. I was terrified, but I did it. They loved it, and they hired me, and for 6 months, that's how I earned my living as a professional street juggler. Thank you. Whew. So fast forward. Today, I run an award-winning workforce performance improvement company. We help business leaders design and build training programs and tools that support training, and when I4PL invited me to speak with you, I thought, wouldn't it be fascinating to go back to that time when I was juggling and look for lessons that might apply to those of us in instructional systems design? What do you think? Sound good? Okay, great. So at the time, I learned 1,000 lessons when I learned that, but time is short, so I've chosen 3. All right. So number 1, be clear and ask for what you want. All right. When I was juggling, I was pretty clear that what I wanted was money. And I wanted the crowd to enjoy my show, but I also wanted them to open their wallets, dig deep, and put some of their hard-earned cash in my hat. And I had a handful of ways of asking for that. One of my favorites was to joke about it. And in the middle of my show, I'd grab my hat and I'd turn to the audience and I'd say, whenever I pick up my hat, someone always says, "Russ, is that a magic hat?" Let me try that again. Whenever I pick up my hat, someone always says, "Russ, thank you." Of course it's a magic hat, because whenever I pull it out, people disappear. It was just a funny way of drawing attention to the fact that I was not performing for free. And it gave me a perfect opening to then ask for people to put cash in my hat, right? So, as instructional designers, how many of you are instructional designers? Show of hands. Okay, great. So, as instructional designers, we are charged with creating experiences that help people acquire knowledge and skills, right? And if we can do that in a manner that is fast and efficient or effective, we can consider ourselves successful, yes? But it takes a lot to do that. We have to understand the needs of the business. We have to understand the needs of the learner. We have to determine the end goal and the steps required to achieve that goal, right? So there's a lot happening. And the more specific we can be with our clients up front about what we need, the time, the people, the material resources, the easier it is for them to provide those things, right? Okay? So quick example, simple example. At Peregrine, when we start an instructional project, we're looking for 2 types of people, access to 2 types of people, subject matter experts and accomplished performers. Okay? Subject matter experts are those people with a theory in their heads, right? And we want access to them, they're valuable, but what we really want is access to those accomplished performers. These are the people in the field who are doing the work successfully every day. All right? And we find at Peregrine, if we can get access to those people, the outputs of our projects tend to be better. So we know this clearly and deliberately up front. We ask for access to the accomplished performer, and more often than not, we get it. Okay? So be clear, ask for what you want. Number 2, let the inmates run the asylum. So back when I was juggling, one of my juggling coaches encouraged me to get audience members more involved in my shows. Coming to you, ready? All right, and for you, ready? Here it comes. All right, thanks. And I would have them hold and examine dangerous objects, if only to prove that they were real. I would have them choose the props that I would juggle. And I might have them throw props to me. Great, thanks. And one more? Great, thanks. Or at me, in the case of small children and instructional designers. Thanks. And what I found was that when I got the audience more involved in my shows, the shows became more fun and more engaging, and the crowds got larger and they stuck around longer. All good things, right? So, thinking about instructional design, one of my favorite principles comes from a mentor of mine, Tyagi. You may know him. He has this adage. He would say, in any given instructional project, the person who learns the most is rarely the student. It's usually the instructional designer. Bit of a paradox, right? But think about it. It's the instructional designer who's doing all the hard work. We are the ones who are going out into the real world and interviewing the expert. We are the ones who are reviewing the source materials and evaluating those materials, right? And learning in the process. So the idea here is simply to get out of the way of the student, the participant. Let them do more of that work that you do as the instructional designer. Empower them and hold them accountable. Let them help out with the design. Let them be the trainers. Ooh. Let them help build and test the job aids and the quizzes and the games that you will use to help future participants learn. Right? And to recall this, just remember the phrase, let the inmates run the asylum. All right, number 3? All right, number 3, do your best work, but be prepared for mistakes. I still remember the day, actually it was the night, that I learned I did not have to be afraid of dropping things. I was at a comedy club and I was watching an extraordinary juggler perform, and in the middle of a complex move, he dropped a ball. And rather than get upset, he turned to the audience and, sounding just as surprised as we were, he said, "Sudden burst of gravity. Did you feel that?" Exactly. The audience burst into laughter, and he just carried on with his performance. Turns out, jugglers have 1,000 ways of recovering from dropped props. They call these drop lines. Another part of the act, just the part I didn't practice. So, it might sound odd, but before this time, before I learned about these drop lines, I was terrified of dropping things, and I didn't take any risks. After that time, it became normal. I began to realize if I wasn't dropping things, I wasn't pushing myself hard enough. All right? So I'd like to encourage you as instructional designers and training consultants to remember that. If you're not making a few mistakes here and there, chances are you are not taking enough risks, and you are not pushing yourself and your team hard enough. All right? So let's review. When you start your next instructional project, number 1, be clear about what you want, what you need in order to be successful, and ask for it. Okay? Number 2, don't be afraid to let the inmates run the asylum. Get your participants involved with the design and engaged with the content sooner rather than later. Okay? And number 3, do your best work, but be prepared for mistakes. All right? Find some mistake recovery strategies that work for you and use them. Okay? If you have any questions, come see me after the talks. I would be delighted to meet you. We can talk shop, talk about design strategies, mistake recovery strategies, or I'll even give you a juggling lesson. So, I got to wrap up, but before I go, would you like to see a little more juggling? Okay. All right. All right, so help me out with this if you would. So 1, 2, 3. Here we go. 1, 2. Oh, come on, you guys can do better than that. I'm about to risk my life up here. These bad boys are sharp, all right? So use some diaphragm. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right. Whew, I can hardly see for those lights. Thank you. Ha, there it is. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoy the remainder of the conference.